Thank you. Thanks. Thanks so much, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I appreciate you joining us for the session. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the program that I'm team leader of at the Council to Homeless Persons, a bit about the history of advocacy in consumer participation or lived experience in our sector, where we're going now and how we're working, and then perhaps what the future could or should look like. So the Peer Education Support Program is better known as Pesp, the Consumer Participation Program at the Council to Homeless Persons. We recruit people with a lived experience of being without a home, a diverse range of people. We have about 14 working with us at the moment, and they draw on those experience to do a whole range of work with us. So they work through every arm of CHP in all our programs, and then outwardly as well, doing things like public presentations, sitting on advisory groups or steering committees, doing media work, a whole range of things that really is in recognition of the fact that through their experience, they've gained an expertise. And if we're going to end homelessness and have good service delivery, that we need to work alongside of them to make sure that we're well informed in that regard. When Pesp first started in 2005, there was very little sort of lived experience roles in the sector. So Pesp was probably it in that time, I would say. And really the way that we were doing things is someone with a lived experience would be asked to present, that they would, stand up, talk about their experience sort of from the moment they lost their home through to when they hopefully got a home. There wasn't really a recognition of that being an expertise. It was more about, let's learn from you telling us what that experience was like, how you access service delivery, and how you got through the other end. So hopefully the audiences did take learnings from that, but it probably wasn't as strategic as it is now. The way that we work with Pesp to advocate now is very strategic. So it's really, there's a great focus in the training. So we do induction training, which is 1 day a week for 8 weeks. And there's some specific elements of that training that focuses on that advocacy being really effective. One of them is understanding how the broader system works. So then that person can put their experience into context, because it's very hard to know what you want to keep or change in the service system if you don't really have a context for your own experience. So that's one of the key things. Then there's a really big focus on messaging. So thinking about your experience rather than what we ask in the service system, which is tell us every horrible thing that's happened, and you don't really get a say in what you want to tell us. If you want to get a resource, then you've got to, bare your soul. So in the training, we ask people to own that experience back, which takes some time and takes some effort, but it's also very focused on what people decide their own messaging is. So, not being told that you must focus on this particular thing, but what do you want to say? What have you learned? And what are the key things that you want audiences to know about from your learnings? So it's really positioning those people as experts. With that messaging then, once that's formed, there is some training around being solutions focused and using really positive language. So not focusing on things that are the problems per se, because, a lot of people know what the problems are. It's really about focusing on what they want the solutions to be. I can't say enough about the recognition of expertise. It's really, it's not a tokenistic thing. It's about placing someone front and centre as someone who can teach us something really important. The future is uncertain, I suppose, because we're not there yet. But we have a growing lived experience workforce. We have a growing consumer participation space in the workforce. And then we have peer support worker roles that are just starting to grow. Personally, I would really like to see that lived experience boom, to see a lot of opportunities, both for consumer participants and for peer support workers and other lived experience roles in our sector. There's a real opportunity to provide people with employment opportunities in our sector, to use their expertise in a way that can benefit our services, that can benefit government policy, and to build that person's confidence back up, build their experience up, have a great CV that looks really good, and, you know, at the end of the day, everyone wins. So I hope that through the conversations today, we can actually sort of work through that and have a good chat about what that might look like and how we might get there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Lisa Townsend, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the peer education, I'm part of the peer education and support program with the Council for Homeless Persons. I have a lived experience of homelessness from around the age of 14. I've experienced different types of homelessness, whether it be rooming houses, share accommodation, squats, and as a result, accessing support through the service system. You know, spending maybe 8 hours in a day hoping to get some sort of support, ending up with nothing. You know, real touch and go. I started feeling what I refer to now as system fatigue. And it wasn't a choice, it was more of I just didn't have the energy to keep going, to keep accessing support through different organisations and whatnot. And so in the end, I opted to sleep rough, which led to 4 years of sleeping rough in and around the streets of Melbourne. The overwhelming feeling of hopelessness, not belonging anywhere. It was one of the loneliest experiences of my life. But I was lucky enough to qualify for an intense supportive housing program. And it was my case manager that recognised I had a lot of valid knowledge and a passion to talk about, you know, what worked, what didn't, and what they were getting wrong, like so wrong. And with this conversation that went on for weeks with her, she kept pushing the Pesp program to me, saying, you know, you need to talk to this you need a platform where you can talk about this, you know, where you can share your experiences because they're valid. And it's so broad, you know, it doesn't matter why you've ended up on the street, doesn't matter what's brought you to being without a home. That hopelessness and that feeling of not belonging anywhere is something that we all relate to. Something that Pesp and CHP has given me, my whole life. I was the no-hoping drug addict that had never amounted to anything, that had thrown their life away. Pesp has changed the narrative of my life, and that time I spent making those bad choices and living that life, I'm now using that knowledge to educate others and to help others, you know, support people that are living that life that I was living. And to me, I mean, that in itself is, I don't have the words for it. It's literally changed my life. And when I think about the Pesp program just being in Victoria, and I think about the potential of having something like this spread out nationwide, the untouched potential of people that are living in crisis, that are living in the constant grind of homelessness. They haven't thought about what their goals are in life, what their dreams are, who they want to be and where they want to go in life, because they haven't had a chance, because they're constantly looking for shelter, for warmth, for food. I just think the potential of a lived experience workforce across not just the homeless sector, mental health, addiction, across everything. I just think the value in having the voice of a lived experience is, it's, I don't think it's the potential of it. I don't think it's something that we can measure until we try. Our experiences, good or bad, they all matter. When I was asked to speak here today, I was asked, what's my message? And I really thought about it long and hard, because in the different training sessions and the different presentations and stuff I do, my messaging is always different. If I'm talking to local community, it's about kindness. If I'm talking to local government, I guess with them it's about, again, kindness, compassion, training new case managers coming into the sect, talking about housing first principles and everything like that. I guess my message for them is, you're going to come across difficult clients. You're going to come across clients that are deflated with the system. Don't give up. Don't give up. Persist with them, because you're coming up against something that could be 20 years of disappointment. So in saying that, we all know the value of the voice of lived experience. So why not have a lived experience workforce, not only in all supportive organisations across the board, but more importantly, in government? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cass and Lisa. I'm looking at the heavens because I'm hoping the tech people are going to bring in Daisy Gleeson, who's joining us virtually at the moment. Is that right, guys?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. So you can hear me?
You guys can't yet, I realise, but she's there.
Tell me when you're ready for me to speak.
Panel can see you, Daisy. So the audience can hear you but not see you. So I reckon we're going to get that going right now. So we might get you. Yay! No. Okay. Over to you, Daisy.
Hello. This is a very discombobulating experience calling in like this. I can see you, but you can't. Oh no, I can't see the audience, which is very strange. I did try really hard to get there and rebooked flights, but I've got a virus and I don't think it's a gift that you would like to receive from me today. So I am calling in from my home, which sits on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I would like to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and I also dedicate to unlearning the colonial teachings of my past and hold space to learn and grow whilst listening to the voices of our First Nations people. Sovereignty was never ceded in this place, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So my name is Daisy Gleeson, and I am a lived experience organisational consultant, supervisor and national trainer for intentional peer support. My living experience is not one of homelessness, but of mental health challenges. Many things have happened throughout my life, situations where I have lost power, and my mind, body and soul have forged ways in which to survive my reality and pain. I've been able to make meaning from being in these barren places, and have been fortunate to use these experiences in my work in lived experience roles for nearly a decade. Whilst my work has been primarily focused in the mental health space, I have witnessed again and again people who are experiencing a combination of mental health challenges, homelessness, alcohol and drug addiction, domestic violence, just to name a few. And the resounding experience that I have witnessed within our services was that if this was your experience, you would end up having 3 different service streams, multiple organisations involved, and a complex web of supports. And alternatively, you could be asked, and we saw this a lot, what your primary need was, and then often get told, look, sorry, that's not our space. You'll need to go to that service and work on that issue before we can support you. And you might be wondering why I'm speaking of that dynamic and what it has to do with peer support and lived experience workforce. And it's my belief that we need to be careful that we do not recreate the same service silos within peer work structures that we have created within other areas of system structure and funding. Our experiences, our lived experiences, are not created in these silos. And so we need to be seen as people, whole people. And when we look at peer work, let's not create an us-them dynamic, but work towards us. So I was lucky enough to be connected with Cass and the Pesp program And Cass actually reached out to the community mental health organisation I was working for to explore peer work and what it might look like in the homelessness sector for the Pesp team. And can I just say this? We need more people like Cass in this space. People willing to bridge gaps, advocate and hold space even when things are hard, really hard. People who want to create change and are passionate about creating relationships regardless of what our lane is intended to be or what the uphill battle looks like. That's the work. Looking to others to learn and to realise you are not alone in this journey. My first experience with the Pesp crew was holding a co-reflection spaces with them. And one of the first realisations I had throughout discussions was that their experiences of homelessness had similar core undertones that I could relate to. Whilst I do not know what it is like to live without a home, I do know what it is like to not have power, for others and systems to make decisions for me and not with me, to grieve, to feel lost and hopeless, and for people to brush over my fears and feelings, to be stigmatised and judged. We connected on the emotional elements of experience. There are so many versions of peer work out there, yet what it comes down to for me is connection to emotion. Peer work, regardless of what sector it is about connection, giving relationships time and space to grow without pressure of a place that we must get to or a goal that we must meet. Peer work is growing relationships in a very intentional way. Whilst this sounds like an easy task, let me tell you from my experience, it is not. Peer work is a really nuanced skill. Peer workers are asked to reach inside of themselves, connect with a person on an emotional level, be present to witness pain without problem solving or jumping to risk management. Hold human emotions and experiences without stigma. This is hard to do when so much of our worldview and service structure is made up to fix problems. And as such, peer workers are constantly looking at their part in relationships. Was this my fear of what they said that made me react in this way? Are we disconnecting? How can we acknowledge that and reconnect? How do my fears and assumptions impact how I am within this relationship? Is there another possibility? Peer workers are constantly learning and working on understanding not just the relationship with the person they are working with, but their relationship with themselves. This way of working and peer work is exploding. The funding for peer work in mental health, for instance, is expanding at an absolutely rapid rate. And you only need to look at the Victorian Royal Commission into Mental Health to see the evidence as to the meaning peer work brings to relationships and moving through difficulty and the funding that's resulted from this. And I believe that funding, and it's my honest hope that this will be happening in the homelessness sector in coming years. So the opportunity that the homelessness space has here is some time. You can get in front of the wave and lay your foundations and knowledge for when peer work really starts its rapid expansion in the homelessness space. You have an opportunity to be ready, where the mental health space and AOD spaces weren't necessarily ready. It is so important for organisations to look to understanding peer work before they implement it, because it is a different way of working. Through my work, I have seen many organisations receive funding for peer workers, employ them, and then a year or two down the road, things have fallen apart. And I get asked to come in, unpack the challenges and to repair relationships. The common theme I see is organisations not doing this work before employing peer workers. Having a new workforce come into pre-existing structures is difficult for those that were there previously and for those that are new. Change can be scary, and we can hold fear and assumptions. Working with staffing teams to not only understand what peer work is, but to also unpack their own fears, ask questions, and to lean in with vulnerability are all part of the process. Organisations have a responsibility to future peer workers and to the participants to spend time understanding what the needs of the people are that they are supporting, always keeping in mind nothing about us without us. Get people involved, ask questions, and link in with other services who have gone down this path before you. Look at what training is available. I'm a huge personal advocate for intentional peer support training, obviously. I wouldn't be delivering it if I hadn't seen the value in the work. It's a transformative relational tool, and it provides the how in peer work. How do we create relationships where we can vulnerable but not be treated as fragile, where we can hold other possibilities, where we can choose to learn together instead of creating the expert power over dynamics so common in these spaces. We need to invest in managers training, core training for peer workers, and co-reflection on an ongoing basis. Often what we see are organisations training their peer workers in core IPS training and then coming back and asking for managers training because they need an understanding of the model their peer workers are working from. You have an opportunity to be proactive here. Since connecting with the Pesp program, I've had the opportunity to co-reflect with their peer workers, deliver intentional peer support training, both core and to the managers, and hold space for managers' co-reflection. The conversations, learning, and hope that has been created within these spaces has highlighted the intense need for peer work to not only be part of the homelessness sector, but for it to be championed, for organisations and sector leaders to lean into the unknown of peer work with a willingness to learn and let go of some of the assumptions or structure that is previously put in place to make them, the organisation, feel safe. So my 3 main takeaway points is let's not recreate the silos. Let's work together with services that have come before and will come after, who have walked down this road already. Peer work is about connection, and it is different from other forms of practice. Implementing it requires courage and vulnerability for organisations to lay foundations. Don't be reactive, be proactive. And look into what training is right for you. Maybe it's RPS, maybe it's something else. It's not just about training peer workers, but all elements of our organisation and structures having this understanding. And I'd just like to end with this. I remember working with an individual many years ago, and it came to the end of our relationship. When we first met with them, they'd been living with homelessness, they had some mental health things that were going on in their life, domestic violence and AOD. And their life had really changed in the 2-ish years that we'd been working together. And they thanked me. And I remember saying, oh, I didn't do anything because I really felt like I hadn't. I'd made a couple of linkages, but I felt like that was about it. And I remember them replying, you were there. You didn't give up. I knew that we could talk about anything and you never judged me. Knowing I had you in my life gave me the time and the space to do what I needed to move through. And that is peer work. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Daisy, and beautiful tech work, by the way. I'm going to introduce Leander to take us through our next presentation.
Hello again. I think we'll get some slides up that you may have seen already, if that's okay. My name's Leander Kreltszheim. I work with Mission Australia in Naarm, a city that we more recently have started to call Melbourne. My work, my purpose, my values are continuously inspired by the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work on. And I'm realising that we're quite a Victoria-heavy panel today. Am I correct? Not completely, but there's quite a few people. In terms of the land. So today I'd really just like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. And I pay respect to Ngunnawal elders, past and present, and extend my deep research to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today, online, as well as in person here, or perhaps watching the recording later on. This always was and always will be Aboriginal lands. Now, I work under a variety of titles, so please don't define me by my title. Sometimes I'm a service designer, I'm a human-centred designer, I'm a co-designer. This morning, I think I was a change maker. More important than what I'm called is actually what I do. So I champion the mindset and tools of something called human-centred design in order to develop more innovative, effective, and sustainable solutions to the social challenges we see every day. Yes, homelessness, but also social isolation, mental health, drugs and alcohol, or relationships with drugs and alcohol, intergenerational trauma, and the intersection of all of these, as we all know in this room. And today, I guess, I'd like to bring you into my world of design a little bit. So it's a little bit different from lived expertise that we've spoken about. I'm going to start talking about lived experience, and I think it's a really good invitation for a discussion about what the difference is later on. I haven't gone into that in my speech. I'd really like to talk about the significant role that having people with a lived experience of homelessness or other issues can actually play in designing the services, but also the policies, the strategies, the moments, the products, the everything that we use when we serve community. Now, here's the biggest contribution I'm going to make today. I'm actually just going to stand aside. And I'm going to ask Haja, who's one of the young people with whom I worked with recently in Canterbury Bankstown, to take the floor. You want to join me?
Hello, everybody. My name is Haja Suma, and I'm 22 years old. I'm currently studying Bachelor of Counselling. sorry, I'm really nervous right now. Yeah, my study has helped shape my perspective on mental health and the importance of seeking help for those. I've been I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. Sorry. I got into studying counseling because my goal in life is to help people and to do anything in my power to help people. So I feel like counseling for me, that would be it. And in addition, seeking counseling for myself has been a very amazing help for me. And Mission Australia has been a great help with that because I seek counseling help with Mission Australia. I've been accessing Mission Australia services since 2019, at a time when I found myself couch surfing. Yeah, thanks to my best friend at the time and her family for welcoming me into their home and treating me like a family and never making me feel like I'm a burden to them. So I'm very grateful to them, and thank you to Mission Australia again for providing me with all the helps that I needed from them. So very grateful. They Mission Australia has helped me go into transitional property, youth rent choice, and currently they did help me get a job. I've secured that job for over a year now, and I've secured my apartment for a while now. Mission Australia CBYS, which is Canterbury Bankstown Youth Services, has offered us a really great workshops to help broaden our knowledge and skills. The latest workshop I was involved in with about 15 other people was about designing peer-to-peer mentoring service for us, the young people, and also those who are in transitional accommodations. I met Leander and Andrew sitting there. They were from Mission Australia. They presented the workshop to us. They informed us that Mission Australia is in the process of developing a new well-being program for us, the young people, and we'll be part of testing that idea. The project, from my understanding, was for us, the youth, helping, guiding, and mentoring each other through our day-to-day struggles. The workshop went for 1 day a week for 3 weeks. I truly enjoyed this project. I was encouraged to share my perspective and listen to others share their perspective. We did a storyboard based on two different case studies on our second week. And in our last week, we did role plays, which was my favorite. It was really amazing. And in this role plays, we talked about the different conflicts that can arise between the mentors and the mentees. We asked the rooms about how can the mentor and the mentee can come to a resolution, how would that look like and all. We talk about what type of boundaries should be set between mentors and mentees. We also talk about the roles and the responsibilities between these two groups. After the workshop, I did talk to a friend of mine who could not join us at the workshop. She was very disappointed that she couldn't be part of it because it was during the week, and also she just started a new job at that time. This made me really sad to know that there was some people that didn't show up after the very first session because they had work, school, and other commitments that they couldn't cancel to come to this. I hope in the future, Mission Australia can at least try to figure out a timing that can suit everybody that want to attend the workshops and stuff. I think it's important for us, the youth, to be involved in building new services because of our experiences and works of life, our skills and our strengths. This will truly bring a new perspective into the programs and the services that are created. It's also very empowering to know that our voices are valued and important. Also, young people being involved in designing services allow us to learn new skills that can be used for our future employment, our confidence, and self-esteem building. Knowing that our knowledge and our creative skills are being used to create something great that can impact other people later. Thank you so much for listening to me.
You want to start up here with me? Yeah. Thanks, Heather. Thank you so much, Haja. Now I can hear the clock ticking, and I know that we've got other speakers. We're okay? Okay, so I have tried to cut this down to 3 main points, and basically this is an invitation to come speak to me later if you want to know any more. Beautiful. So I've got 3 points. The first one, lived experience is more than a nice to have. If we want to ensure that our services and other solutions, that they work, we need to give a voice to the people who are using them. And I'm hoping that we have people in the room that are already the converted, but we have other people that are here to actually understand what this looks like and why it's of benefit to people other than the people with lived expertise. But let's start with people who have a first-hand experience of homelessness services, or the system more broadly, have important knowledge, insights and wisdom that are integral inputs into the design of service responses. And I think we've heard that in ample amounts this morning already. Working with young people in Bankstown specifically, I was fascinated to listen and really sit back and actually just listen to what it was like being a young person navigating the system of homelessness and housing services in that particular area at that particular time. So the project we were developing was a peer-to-peer mentoring service, and it was so much richer for understanding the various touch points or moments that young people go through, being mindful that no 2 journeys look the same for 2 people. For example, we learnt which moments in a housing service were the most scary, and when support from somebody with a similar lived experience might actually provide them with a friendly ear or advice. I learnt that mobile phones were most young people's most prized object, and not for any superficial reason, but because they symbolised connection to others, family, friends, particularly when they were moving around. And I learnt what, to these young people, developing trust with a mentor looked like. So what it looked like when it was there, but also what it looked like when it was absent. And I've noticed that acknowledging people with a lived experience as experts can be challenging to some people in our sector, maybe not immediately. But what I'm finding is that we may need to redefine our expertise and be ready to acknowledge the power of those for whom we might have traditionally helped. So it's a fine line, but we won't be working for community. We'll be working alongside or with community. We won't necessarily have all the answers, and that's okay, because we'll learn to ask the right questions from those who do. We don't empower others. We actually just create and facilitate crucial spaces in which people with a lived experience can empower themselves. 2, designing with lived experience is not just about the end output or the outcome. The journey is just as important as the destination, and I think you've heard about this today, so a lot of support behind me as well. I was particularly thrilled when I read Haja's first notes that she felt empowered by the process of designing alongside us. While yes, the main driver for me is often creating a tangible output, so a service model or a product or something like that, personally, I'm more excited by the potential impact that the workshops I run, and not always workshops, but that they can have on the participants involved. Investing in lived experience and expertise can benefit individuals to see their own experience as assets, as strengths, as knowledge, and yes, as you've seen up here, eventually as expertise. People with a lived experience are also overwhelmingly generous, and many benefit from seeing that their own challenges and victories can help others like themselves, or prevent others from even finding themselves in the same position to begin with. That is, involving people with a lived expertise of a social issue often provides them with a sense of agency and hopefully creativity, both important parts of their own recovery and healing. And I've recently been reading a lot about how design workshops provide individuals, or can, with a therapeutic space in which to own, reflect on, and share their story as a part of that recovery journey. So while this research is really new and fairly unexplored, it really excites me to consider how we might step aside to allow individuals to tell their own stories. What if, rather than protecting people from the trauma of their experiences, we created safe and trauma-informed spaces in which individuals can control their own narrative and benefit from the process? And I promise, my last point, participatory methods that partner with people with a lived experience take a greater investment of time, of money, and of heart. And I think you can see ample heart behind me as well. I think we've all got tissues that we've been prepared with as well, because this matters to us. So time. Working with people with a lived experience generally takes more time. It can take longer to design and implement the process, so the workshops, for example. It takes more time to design them. You'll need to work around people's schedules and lives. And when I say lives, I mean all the things that come up on a day-to-day basis that we know about. You may need to bring others from your organisation on board, so you might need to spend time with them, and it does take time. And you may even have to convince people with a lived experience that they bring value to the table. Working with people with a lived experience is also more than asking people for feedback and input. It's more than writing up compelling case studies. And again, we can talk about that a bit further. The second point that I mentioned was money. People with a lived experience should be paid for their expertise. And where this becomes a longer-term role, resourced through training, ongoing professional development and supervision, it is different. I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but if you just believe in paying people for their expertise, then people with a lived experience should also be paid for theirs. And it takes heart. I love what I do. I love being curious. I love listening. I love learning that I'm wrong about things. I love the energy in the room when someone in my workshop realises that they have something valuable to give, that they can even challenge the status quo. They can challenge Mission Australia in what we've said. I love that. They're surprised that they've been remunerated for what they bring to the group. They're often surprised that what they have deserves to be paid for. I love holding space for people like Haja. I love stepping aside, and I love watching her be amazing. All this is important because, as we've heard before, or we've heard just then rather, it's important because it's also really challenging work. I won't always get it right, and I don't. Mission Australia don't always get it right, and we're at the very start of this journey. But we need to constantly remind ourselves that design, co-design, human-centered design, whatever you want to call it, it's a practice. And designing with lived experience is worth it. We've seen how working with those with a lived experience of mental health challenges and disability can shift services in those sectors. So what might it look like if we work to eliminate homelessness in the same way? And finally, yesterday, if you were here at the conference, we definitely spoke a lot about stakeholders in a national plan for homelessness. Today, I've hoped I've given you a little taste of my own small part in working with one of our most important stakeholders of all. So I invite you to consider now and after the conference, how might each of you, whatever your role, your team, your organisation, advocate for and work with people with a lived experience of homelessness in services, in policy, in strategy, in systems change. And I really look forward to hearing your ideas on this question shortly.
Thanks, guys. Our last presentation for this session is from Lorna Robinson. And Lorna, coming up.
Thank you, Jacqui, and hello, everyone. As Jacqui mentioned, I'm the Lived Experience Officer on the Constellation project, and today I want to share with you how I became involved with the Constellation project, a little look into my role and what it means to me, and how lived experience is interwoven throughout the Constellation project. So how I first became involved with the project, I first became aware through a post on LinkedIn. Not only did the opportunity stand out to me because of what it was asking, but it stood out to me as it was calling for and valued lived experience insights and perspectives. I wasn't used to this. I was used to my lived experience being an obstacle rather than something that was valued. And so fast forward a little, I joined one of the social lab teams working to develop practical solutions so that young people who have transitioned from out-of-home care or the youth justice system can avoid experiencing homelessness or be supported to quickly exit homelessness. I honestly see this as one of the best things I've ever done. And while working on the team, I was able to appreciate my lived experience and begin to develop my own power within. Something that stands out as helping me to develop this was seeing vulnerability modeled by people in leadership positions and their experience was just one part of their story, but they were so much more and recognised and valued for so much more. And as such, I think identified lived experience roles are and should be recognised and valued for more than just their experience. So after working in the team for some time, a position for a lived experience officer role was advertised. The position looked great to me. It suited my skills, my experience, and my ambitions. And so I applied and I was successful. And thank you to the skills to the, and thanks to the skills and connections I developed while working in the teams, I transitioned really well into my role. So a little bit into the day of the life of, I guess, as a lived experience officer. My primary responsibility is to embed and integrate lived experience practices within the project. And in my role, I must be able to form strong relationships and connections and think about and use appropriate language and communication. Because of my lived experience, I understand what it takes to share your story, and this helps me quickly to build trust and connections. An example of where these skills were essential was in developing our solution to support young people transitioning from out-of-home care in the youth justice system. Our team's focus was to elevate and centre our solution around young people's voices. So to do this, we interviewed a total of 10 people, young people with lived experience in the system and staff in the system. And due to my lived experience, we saw a benefit in me leading this process and conducting the interviews. And we had some really great results. And it was an absolute privilege that the people I spoke with trusted me and were able to have such open, honest, and deep conversations with me. We're currently in the process of finalising the report, which I'm super excited about. So how lived experience is interwoven through the Constellation project. The Constellation project integrates lived experience across different levels. My role sits on the executive team, where amongst other activities, I'm responsible for identifying opportunities for lived experience inclusion and the recruitment, management and communication. I transitioned from one of the working groups, which is on the map on the slides, and we also have lived experience representation on the board who offers their lived experience and expertise and other valuable skills and perspectives at the governance levels. There's also a research partnership to assess and strengthen our lived experience inclusion and impact in the Constellation project. A person with lived experience, especially in identified roles, while they bring that specific lens, it is just one of many skills that they offer. My hope is that one day lived experience is recognised and valued as any other skill. It will be common and normal to be seen on a resume just as any other skill. And so I would like to finish with a quote. The quote's from Uncle Dan from Relational Systems Thinking by Melanie Goodchild. This quote really resonated with me as it highlights the need to work together to achieve a common goal and the importance of strong and mutual relationships to affect the most meaningful change. Not one perspective, insight or idea is more valuable or favoured. They coexist, and the gap in the middle is where the knowledge lies. There are two vessels sailing down the river of life together. I'll start it again. There are two vessels sailing down the river of life together. It is our responsibility to help one another, but more specifically, the river of life is in danger right now, and there will be no more river. We need to utilise our collective wisdom to strengthen the river. At the end of the day, any social innovation or system stuff should be about the continuation of life and however we understand it to be. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Can we just give these guys some love, please? So we've got 38 and a half minutes to dig into. We've got a huge timer right in front of us here, in case you were wondering why I'm being so precise. To dig into some questions. I've got a couple of questions from online already, so I'm going to start with those. But equally, put your hand up now, because someone will bring you a mic, and we'll go to the floor and the room next. And I've got a bunch of questions in my head, and also some ones I wrote down. So I'm also looking for some people to ask those. So please take the opportunity. I wanted to just start with one from online, and who just particularly wanted to thank Lisa for sharing your story, which gave this person permission to get emotional, and saying being vulnerable is really powerful. So thank you, Lisa. Now, really specific question for Cass and Lisa about, will the PSP program be extending throughout Australia? And if so, how and when? If not, why? Possibly that last bit you don't need to answer. But is there any potential that it will extend throughout Australia?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I'm very ambitious, so I have to be careful what I say, because my boss is in the audience. Look, we had a research evaluation done of our program a number of years ago, and there are several suggestions that came out of it, or recommendations, if you like. One of them was there should be a Pesp type program in every peak body around Australia.
Yeah.
There is potential for that to happen. It doesn't, we're not, probably, you know, because we sit with a peak body in Victoria, we could lend some expertise when it comes to, say, training and support for those peaks, which I have Pesp members and I have worked on in the past. I find that those organisations always come up against the issue of funding. Yeah. So the will's there, the heart's there, all of the ideas are there, but it really is a matter of dollars, as you can't do it. You know, you can't do it by stretching the resources you already have, because you'll end up with something that's a bit crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And back to Leander's point, and 100% agree, you have to fund this work.
Yes.
You can't do it for free, and it's not reasonable to expect, right? I want to go to someone. We got a question from the floor. Yes?
The answer is yes. I heard about the PSP in the 2018 conference, so I tested the big body in Queensland to get PSP delivered there, and we did get it delivered last year, mainly by a group, so yes, I'm the Queensland. I think we've got a national regulator for community housing. We might as well take a national approach to it. So it's proven now that it can go out there, and what Lisa was saying at the end about how about lived experience getting influencing policy in government. How about at the regulator level, where tenant engagement isn't just listening, but they are required to give tenants opportunity to take part in proper training, and maybe even a Cert 4, like there is peer workforce in mental health, there's social housing Cert 4. How about a Cert 4 in peer workforce in social housing?
Yeah. Great. I'm going to go to one more from online. This is for the two ends of the panel. You can decide who wants to go first. It's refreshing to have young people presenting today. I'm not being rude to the middle part of the panel, but I think we are. That's dangerous, isn't it?
I'm fine with that.
How did you overcome the fear and created the trust in sharing your experience? Do you want to start, Haja?
First, like, I trust in Mission Australia, so I know they will not put me in anything that was going to harm me or anything. So, yeah, I just talked to Lucy, Leander. They were all very supportive, and they made sure, like, the whole program was very supportive. Everybody that was included can just share. It was like a very comfortable, safe space for us, and we can share. We joked around, and also most of the people that were part of the workshop I've known them for like a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So familiarity, it makes it easier to like share my experiences, share my perspective. While in a place like this, with people I'm not familiar with, I might be more reserved. So I think having more familiarity with people and putting them in a group, like in groups of people they've known before, can actually help and build the courage and stuff. Yeah, I think I answered it.
Yeah, you
Beautifully.
totally did. What do you reckon, Lorna?
Yeah, I agree with Haja, and I think that yeah, I guess like connections, relationships with people are important, and to have like that already in place beforehand, I think that's helpful. But yeah, I think it all comes down to feeling safe and having a safe environment, and the fact that if you feel as though the lived experience is valued, that makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Have I got another floor question? Oh.
No.
Yes.
Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to the panel. This has been a really, really brilliant session. I think often organisations can be very passive in their attempts to engage people with lived experience. They wait for people to come to them. And I'd be really interested to know some of the ways that your organisations kind of actively seek out and engage people with lived experience.
Who wants to start? I think we've probably all got something to say about that, haven't we? Yeah.
I can start off with something which also responds to what Haja was saying. So Haja pointed out to the amazing Lucy, who's in the audience. So I work as part of a national office team, particularly with New South Wales and Victoria. Lucy is the program manager who works in Bankstown and looks after Canterbury Bankstown Youth Services. So whenever we do work, it's not me trying to find young people. It's me working in all the collaborations that are already set up. So that's a huge part of it. And, you know, we can definitely have, you know, we've had discussions about how we can improve on finding the right people, but very much it's about working with who's there, trying to find out what existing trusting relationships already are there. And then the other thing is, again, giving them time to find the right people, because we're not just saying we're running a program, we want young people who tick that box and people who've had homelessness tick that box. It's a very specific project that we're working on, and we want people that who you know can best engage in the topic, and so we need to give time for people to find that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a few ways that the Council to Homeless Persons recruits people to the Pesp. Lisa's spoken a bit about it as far as being advised by a support worker. I think, A, because we've been around quite a while now, and B, because we have such great relationships with across, you know, throughout the sector, people kind of know about us. And I keep those relationships going with support workers, with services. And so I find when about the 2-year mark, I tend to get emails or phone calls from people saying, hey, are you recruiting this year? So that's one part. And that really is about building up reputation and creating relationships, seeking out relationships with services and the appropriate people who support people who potentially might be great for Pesp. The other way is that we recruit like you would a staff member. So we advertise the position. Excuse me. We have a pretty thorough recruitment process that really nods its head at the importance of the role. So there's an interview panel. People can meet with me before the interview, so they have a friendly face on the day. They know the building. And then there's the interview panel, as I said, and then we interview everyone who applies, which is quite a big job. But it's important that we, you know, you give value to the fact that someone's got the courage, and it takes a lot of courage sometimes, to actually put themselves out there and apply. And it might have been the first job interview process they've gone through for a while. So I think it's important for us to support them through that. But yeah, so we advertise both in sort of mainstream places as well as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander space.
Great. Do you want to talk about recruiting the participants for the interviews that you did, Lorna?
Okay, yes, that was probably slightly different. So that came a lot from my own network and people's networks from within the team. So we recruited the interview participants through that way, or through young people that might be a client or something. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that just because I think it's one of the things that's happened a lot on Constellation Project, which is that we've recruited one person who's brought their network in, and that's always been interesting, that you have to create those initial relationships. And as you say, you can do that in quite a traditional way of advertising a role, but sometimes equally it's because someone brings someone. You know, it's one of those classic people trust each other, they have a relationship, and so they come in. We've experienced that a lot on Constellation Project. So as I say, on Constellation, we've done similar to you guys in our original design session, our original strategy session. We had a number of people with lived experience participate, and they came out of the networks from Mission Australia, from Australian Red Cross. So we had existing networks of people who worked with those organisations, and then they've built over time. I've got another couple of questions I wanted to ask this one. This came from online. It's a really interesting question. It's challenging to engage people who are currently experiencing homelessness or in crisis to share their stories or messages. How can we encourage this? And I want to throw that to the panel.
This is actually something we talk about in different trainings that I do. I think in any, no matter what, kindness, you know, goes a long way. But I just think persistence.
Yep.
When someone's rough sleeping, they've obviously been through the service system time and time and time again. You don't know what sort of disappointment, like promises, empty promises and whatnot you're coming up against. So I guess when approaching someone, if you get that sort of push off kind of, you know, don't talk to me, just persist, you know, be kind, whether it's something like a cup of coffee or just a friendly smile, build a rapport. And then I think, you know, that opens the door for a conversation. That person feels important again. And yeah, I think that opens the door. Yeah. I think bottom line, it just comes down to kindness.
Yeah.
I think maybe too, it might just as soon as I started speaking, I lost it. I think as well, it's you need to understand why the person wants to hear your story. What are they going to do with it? So I think the person who's being asked to tell their story needs to understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Another question for you, Lisa. And great work from this questioner. Had great experience of your staff. Question is, should the lived experience workforce undertake specific training for different sectors? For example, the health sector. I'm not sure I'm understanding that question entirely. Do you want to have a go at that though?
I think it's kind of alluding to the fact, like when I was talking about the value of a lived experience.
Yeah.
No matter if it is the mental health, AOD, homeless sector, whatever else. I just think the value of the lived experience of someone going through that system, going through that service and experiencing I just think the value in that and the learnings from that are you know, there's no way of gauging what we can learn, what we can get from it, because we just don't know, because it's untouched.
Yeah, I want to come back to that actually on the panel and about about what's happening. Someone else raised about how mental health sector is kind of way ahead of us. And I'd love to hear you guys comment on that. So I'm just going to plant that seed right now and come back to it. There's another question here, and I should probably go to the floor at this point because I've ignored the floor for a little bit. I'm going online. Have I got another? Yeah, go down here.
Oh, well.
Yes? Blue, grey, blue? Yeah. It's all right. We're just going to get you a mic.
Okay, sorry, too loud. I like the way you framed it, the emotional experience of connection and disconnection that perhaps led to systems and service fatigue. And at some point in that fatigue, you chose, to sleep rough for 4 years. So my question is in two parts. The services just not hear you, or they just chose not to hear you, or even if they did hear you, they just kept doing more of the same.
I think there's several reasons. I think one, at DIF, like we all know, there's just no affordable accommodation out there appropriate for anyone, families, single people, whatever. Yeah. But I think also, and I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, what was the first part of your question again? Fatigue. That's it. Yeah, the whole system fatigue. You can spend up to 8 to 10 hours in an intake point at one time at trying to access support to keep you off the street that night. You might be lucky to get 3 nights in a motel. You might get 1 night in a motel. You might not get anything. But that's an 8 to 10 hour chunk taken out of your day where it may result in nothing. So when you think about that, having to do that every single day, to might be lucky to get 1 night in a motel room, to have to be back there at 8:30 the next morning to try and get that support again so you've got somewhere to sleep that's safe that night. When you're doing that every 3 days, it gets really hard to manage everything else, the trauma, the mental health, undiagnosed, untreated mental health, whatever it is you've got going on for you. So I think this is where the whole system fatigue, as I call it, came in for me. It was easier for me to put myself, in a spot in the Melbourne CBD where I could set my day up and I knew at 6 o'clock in the morning I could get breakfast and I could have a shower. They closed by 9 o'clock. So then I knew I could move to the Salvation Army. And then from there I could go and spend a few hours on the street doing whatever I did. And then I knew at 6 o'clock I could go and get my dinner. So, yeah, it was easier for me to manage my you call it like the white noise in my head because of my mental health issues, my addiction issues and everything like that, if I just stopped engaging with the service system.
Yep.
Sorry, I hope that answers.
Yep.
Like I have to. Thank you. So I've lived experience myself, so I completely understand what you were saying. And another thing is that's really challenging is that when you do go to housing services and they do put you in a motel, hotel, mostly a motel for a night, if you have somebody there that comes and visits you, you're then booted and they will not assist you anymore. And I think that's not fair, right? Because people are already isolated and then you are bound to stay in that place by yourself with no one. And if there's a visitor, then you're booted and you don't get support. So I understand completely from lived experience, just even that in itself is deterring, and the long extensive list of other deterring things and factors. But I came in late, so I apologize. But I also know that being a lived experience person myself, it's like this natural connection that you just naturally have with people. So yeah, my heart goes out to you. And I'm glad you guys are in this spot and in these positions as well. Thank you.
I've been holding this for a while. Look, first of all, you guys are amazing to sit there and talk about your experiences over here. I'm 35 years off the street, so I'm an old homeless person from the 80s, and so for me, my experience was completely different. So I'm in awe of the barriers that you guys go through today with even having multiple services there. My question is about your experience being a qualification and the ability for us to employ people, right? Because I still, my knot in my stomach to speak today is overwhelming to do this. But at the same time, the struggle to educate yourself when you've left school at the age of 14, 13 is overwhelming, and your experience should be a qualification in a recruitment process. I'm hoping that there might be some movement towards that, rather than having you need a graduate certificate or diploma or a degree, that your experience is enough to get you the position. Is there movement in that?
Do you want to start with that, Lorna? Or who wants to start? Can lived
I'm happy to speak to that if you can hear me.
As part of my, when I first started with Pesp, I didn't have any great qualifications. I still don't have any great qualifications. But as I think it was about 12 months into my time with Pesp, I was actually offered a position with Co-Health under a lived experience health guide type thing on the COVID response team. You know, now I've worked that for the last 2 years. That's something there's no way I would have qualified to do, or I would have even been looked at had I not had the role with CHP. So I think it is, you know, heading in that direction. But it'd be good to have diplomas or something.
Yeah,
under my belt.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add something to that. I'm just musing through it. But in terms of the question around sort of lived expertise being recognised, or lived experience being recognised and then channeled into expertise, and also the idea of qualifications and things, I think my one thought that I come about that is that it starts around the person. It starts around the individual, as opposed to the sector or this is the job and what does the job need. And those traditional ways of looking at roles and qualifications and organisations and organisational charts. So if we kind of put that to the side and just go, we have a person, they have this experience, they have, as we said, it's not just an experience of homelessness or mental health or whatever it is, it's all those other skills that you were talking about. It's all these other strengths that come through at the same time. If we start there and then we go, well, what do we need to support you to do this specific role? And sometimes that will be qualifications, but start from the person and not from the idea that we need to tick a box qualification. And then I think, yes, I think there was maybe a bit of a question up there about qualifications needing to, you know, shift as we grow and learn more as a sector. It will shift, and it might be more specific, or it, you know, we'll see what works, but we kind of have to start somewhere. And I think it starts with the individual.
Yeah. And I think, but I mean, even on this panel, can I just say I love, because what you guys are all doing is reframing lived experience and lived expertise as a strength, and which I think is, and thank you for your question, by the way, but to me, this is what you were alluding to, that we have to reframe lived experience as a strength and a valued contribution, and that's the most, that, you know, and in traditional frameworks in CVs, that's kind of how we think about those kinds of qualifications. So whilst we want to ditch that, at the same time, let's reframe as we go.
Yeah.
Service from. That's the problem, and I think we need to recognise that and break that stigma down, to be proud to basically come out and go, I'm homeless and it's okay, you know, and I have something I can give you, and that is my experience of that.
Daisy, I just realised we've got you on screen. I'm so sorry. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've just been sitting back and listening to this with so much enthusiasm, and there's been a few questions that have piqued my interest. This one specifically, it comes into the conversation when we talk about remuneration and qualifications, and I think that that's a really important conversation to have. We talk about qualifications, and therefore, you know, well, you don't have a degree or a diploma, so therefore you're going to go on to this level of payment. And that's a barrier to people. When I talk about my experiences, I say I've got a 30-year lived experience, but I've got a 4-year degree, and I know which one I use more than the other. And so how can we start changing the conversation to really emphasize the power and the expertise in the lives that we have lived. And the other question that I was thinking about was around the education, and do we need specific education for different sectors? And I think what it boils down to for me is no, not necessarily. Lived experience roles, peer work is about a skill of using your lived experience, regardless of what that your lived experience is. It's about connecting with the core internal emotions of that experience and having a framework to be able to use that. So it doesn't have to be a homeless version, this version, a AOD version of peer work and a mental health version of peer work. Peer work is peer work, and we each use our own lived experiences to project, to have those conversations and relational conversations about how do we do these relationships in a really intentional way, not necessarily the content of our experiences.
I've got one more question from online that if you've got a burning question, now is your opportunity, because there's only going to be a couple more questions.
Can I just, I've been holding the mic for a while. I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
I'm here. I guess what I wanted to say was it's a great presentation, and it's making me think how it can work in the organisation that I work for. But I just wanted to make a political comment. Every time, Lisa, you talked about service fatigue, I slumped, because I think the sector, alongside all people that are experiencing homelessness, have sector fatigue. And I guess I wonder about renaming it to system abuse, because I feel that if you're experiencing homelessness and you need TA and the conditions, particularly in New South Wales, that you have to do have a couple of days accommodation and then get all your stuff and go back into housing to prove that, to me, it just feels like system abuse. So alongside with the system fatigue.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment in response to that? Particularly because I know that we've had some really great speakers around focusing on the housing supply and our housing market. And we need to not forget that causes this stuff. So, if we didn't have the housing crisis, if we didn't have a shortage of affordable housing, someone would go to that homelessness service and they wouldn't have to stand around for 8 hours. They wouldn't have to get one night's motel, because you wouldn't be going to a motel. Someone in danger may have to go to a refuge for a little while, but then you'd exit that refuge into affordable housing, or social housing, sorry. So let's not forget why it's working that way. We've got some incredibly brilliant people working in our homelessness services. They don't want to see this happen either. They get into these jobs for a reason. It's because they care, and they want to be able to give people an outcome. But it's a sad situation for everyone involved. But if we can, do something about that systemic level, about the housing ultimately and support, then you won't get that stuff going on the bottom.
Jacqui, we have a question here.
Sorry, yes, go for it.
Got time for one more question?
Yeah, I've got one more. Yeah.
I got a strong sense from some of the discussion today. There were some sort of tailored recruitment strategies when you're recruiting for people with lived experience, and recognising a lot of people in the situation have come with a lifetime of disappointment. I just wonder if you have any special strategies to deal with those people that are unsuccessful when you advertise for a position.
How do you do it, Cass?
Look, yes and no. You can't. There's no perfect way of doing it that's going to make everything, the person's going to skip away and feel great. Just like with any advertisement of an employment position. I do, have a conversation with them. I try to explain that we can only, so every 2 years we recruit about 6 or 7 people. We're looking for a diversity, right? So for example, for a start, that starts narrowing things down, because you need to make sure that you've got, people with different experiences of the service system, just different reasons or pathways that they got there, different outcomes, to be able to respond to some of the requests that we get for people. So I try to make sure that they're really aware that it's not necessarily about, they're not a great person for the position, that it's really about trying to make sure that we've got the team that we need to be able to meet our responsibilities. And, I think I get a fairly positive response. People are obviously disappointed they didn't get it. But I also let them know that they can apply again if they're interested down the track. That's about the best I could do, really.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, though.
It's a great question. It is 12:26 and I'm aware that we are between you and lunch now. I want to ask for a final comment from every one of the panellists, because this session was really about the lived experience of not having a home. And we were talking about current practice, but we also, and a lot of you talked about how you feel about the future. And I want to ask all of you how you do feel about the future. If you feel hopeful, if you feel positive, and is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to, or any big questions that you'd like to challenge this audience about how we start thinking about the future? And Daisy, you're kind of on the left of the circle, so I might start with you.
I feel really hopeful. I've seen the work that's being done, and I've been really privileged to have some conversations with different organisational managers, team leaders. There is a huge amount of potential in this space. So I feel like there's people who are really willing to lean in and to maybe shake things up and do things differently. So I have a huge bucket of hope that this is going to be an amazing process, not without challenges, but that the future is really bright for peer work in this homelessness space.
Thanks, Daisy. Haja.
Oh, yeah. I feel hopeful. I really hope that one day in the future, I'll be able to get into the sector and be working and helping others as well. So I'm pretty hopeful, fingers crossed, that everything goes well. But yeah, I am really hopeful. I am so glad about the new services that have been created. And I hope in the future, things will get better. Like there will be more services, more funding for services like this. And like, I really hope that all the little projects that are being made now can establish and help young people before, like, catch the problem earlier before it gets like really big and having them sleep on the street, because that's heartbreaking to know that there's people out there sleeping on the street, struggling. Yeah, that's what I got.
Thanks.
I think for me personally, I spend a lot of time going between the individual and the systems level.
Yeah.
And for me, I need to do that. I need to kind of be able to get, forest for the trees sort of thing. I need to be able to step back and kind of see, well, we actually need to think about the bigger picture, but we also need to think about the individual. So that's kind of my personal response to that. But I think also there is so much, people keep talking about hope, and I think there is so much at the moment. So I'm thinking of all the people working in this space at the moment, the growth of those specific roles around lived experience and lived expertise. More and more organisations are getting on board every day. My caveat to that is I think that there's a way of doing it well, and it's a bit more complex than people might think. It's not tick a box. But that aside, I think we're going in that direction, and that gives me, that really excites me. That gives me a lot of hope as well.
Yeah.
As for me, I think it just goes back, like ripping back to the core. This program literally changed my life, changed the narrative of my life, changed the narrative of the way I saw myself.
I wouldn't be in this job if I wasn't. Anything's possible. If as we need the sector, we need government, we need people with, who have had a lived experience of being without a home. We need everyone on board if it's going to be achieved, though.
Yeah.
It can't be little pockets of that's brilliant over there.
Yeah.
We need to work out how to get this consistent. So no matter which program someone joins at which organisation, they get a consistently great experience with consistently benefits for the organisation as well, because it can't go one way. And you know, we really need to work together to make sure that we can get this at a best practice level right throughout. You know, and we can look to Australia like you like me to speak about. Yeah, go big, think big, but do it well.
And yes, I'm also hopeful. And like I said in my presentation, I hope that one day that lived experience is recognised and valued just like any other skill might be. And on that as well, I'm probably most excited about networking, develop, and meeting other people with lived experiences, and trying to help to keep practicing like my own lived experience and try to like empower other people to do so.
Great. Thank you for an excellent conversation. Thank you all for coming. This concludes our session. Please do some session feedback. It's really important. For those of you who are going to lunch, I believe it is over in the exhibition hall. And thanks for joining us online. To everyone, thanks for your questions. They were really wonderful to get all the questions in through the app. There are more questions coming in that we've seen, so we just didn't get time to talk to them all. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.